What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today we're back with another installment of System Crafters Live, our weekly community hangout stream for the System Crafters community. And yeah, today we're going to talk about some cool stuff. We're going to actually focus more on, showing some things in Emacs and maybe doing a little bit of live coding and some planning for future episodes. So we're not going to have like a normal talking topic today as we've been doing the last few weeks, but hopefully that will be fine for everyone. So let me get the screen pulled up here. Whoops, that's the wrong one. All right, let me say hello to some people who are here this morning. A lot of people that have shown up today. Hi to TRDV, to Zamels, to Alex, to Vagelis, to Avocadoras. I guess that's maybe how you pronounce your name. Simon, Felipe, Mark, Donald. Hey, Donald, nice to see you. Dean, Astrocat, Drishal, David. And you had to set your resolution to 1080. Why? Did it start at a lower resolution whenever the stream started? All right. Let's see. Did I miss anybody here? I think, let's see. Donald is here for the first time today, and Avocadoras is here for the first time today, so that's awesome. Glad that you all were able to make it today. Hey, Ramses. Okay, so this week, I guess this week and last week, I've been, tinkering around with some personal projects in my free time that have been pretty interesting, and one of them is worth talking about in the stream today. The other one I think I'll wait on for maybe another stream later after we made a little bit more progress with the Geeks videos. But I just wanted to kind of show this project because I think it will be of interest to people in this channel because, excuse me, because I think at some point you're going to ask yourself the question, how do I take these things that I'm learning about org mode and then be able to use my org files to create a website. So today what I'm going to do is show you how I'm using org mode to generate a static website using only stuff that's built in. Well, okay, I'm not going to say only stuff that's built into org mode, but mostly the stuff that's built into org mode. And how I'm also using the website that we talked about last week on the stream, Sourcehut, to automate the process of generating these pages and then publishing them to a public website that you can go look at. I've basically been doing this for the System Crafters website and for my own personal websites. So it's been working out really well, and I wanted to show people how to do this in case you were interested in trying to do it as well. Let's see who else has just joined. Hi, Eric, nice to see you. Tim, Professor Bruno Ribas, Silly Dragon, Crime Time. Hopefully we don't have any crime here today, but maybe you could say that generating a website with Emacs is a crime. I don't really know how you want to classify that. For me, I think it's fair game. All right, let me close this other laptop here so I don't get distracted by yet another chat. Cool, so let's get into the topic of publishing a website with org mode and Sourcehut. So I've got 3 new sites that I've published. I'll show you really quickly what they look like. They basically all look the same because I'm using the same design and CSS style sheets and fonts and everything for them. But there's a few interesting properties of all these. So let me just pull up the first one, which is my own personal website. Don't look too closely at this one because I haven't really finished the content on it yet, but it'll pull up in just one second. Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit. But basically, this is a pretty decent looking static website, and it loads pretty fast because it is static pages. And you can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner, it's made with Emacs 27.1 with org mode 9.3. And I have, basically a way to have blog articles. There are none written here yet because I haven't moved over stuff from my old blog or haven't written anything new yet. However, you can see that this is sort of like what we're going for here. We're going for a clean looking static website that's being generated from Emacs. And you can't really see it because it's very small. And actually my webcam is on top of it, but the domain for this is davidwill.srht, which is sourcehut.site. So that is something that's each user has the ability to post a website at their own username.srht.site on Sourcehut. And this is what I've done here. However, I am going to hook up my own custom domain to that, which is very possible to do as well. So this is something that comes, we'll say it comes free with your Sourcehut account. Currently, you don't have to pay to use Sourcehut. Eventually, you will have to pay, but they haven't turned that on yet. But this is something that you could use today if you wanted to make your own personal website and set it up pretty easily. The things I'm going to show you today will show you how to do that. You can also see the code for the site if you look at my repository on Sourcehut. So I can pull that out really quickly too. Crime Time asks if I'm going to cover Geeks packaging in the future. Definitely, I'm going to do packaging in the future. There's a lot of opportunities for that. So you can see my site here, the repository for the site at least. And if you look at the tree, excuse me, basically all it has in it is the publish.el file, which has all the code for publishing, which I'll show you in a moment. The public folder, which has some of the CSS and well, some JavaScript files that really aren't needed, but it has JavaScript files there and font files. Then there's like pages and articles. So these are the actual sources for the site. So like the index.org, which is like the index page for the site, which is just fully an org mode file. And articles is empty right now because I don't have any articles, just that index page basically for listing the articles. And then there is a build file, which we'll get into in a little bit whenever we start talking about how to automate this. But as you can see, there's not much here, not a whole lot of code. It's just one Emacs Lisp file, and that one file can do all of the publishing necessary. Similarly, I've done something for my .files repository where I can generate a custom site for my org mode based .files. So if we load this one up, config.davidwheel.com. Excuse me if I have to clear my throat many times today because my kid brought home yet another cold from the daycare, so I'm having to fight that off again. So here we have my .files site, which basically if you've been to my .files repository on GitHub, a lot of this is going to look familiar because it's the same pages. But what I've done here is taken that same style and generated a full website based on my my configuration files. So you can click to any of these pages in the header to see the different parts of the configuration, desktop environment, system configurations, etc. And they're all generated out from the original org file, and the source code is syntax highlighted. So I'm going to show you how I did that also. So I think it turned out really nice. It looks really good, but there's some sort of deficiencies to this compared to GitHub. And I think today what I want to do is to try and live code some of the improvements to the HTML generation for this website so that we can fix one of the things that I would like to have fixed about this. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And that site is also in my .files repository on Sourcehut. The interesting thing is whenever I make commits to this Sourcehut repository for my .files, I'm also mirroring that back to the GitHub repository, and I can show you how to do that as well. And then lastly, we have systemcrafters.cc, which is the main website for system crafters. And that also basically looks the same. I'm going to make these look a bit more unique in the future, but for now, I'm basically just using the same source files. And here we have the same layout, but we have a bunch of different sections for the different video series. If you click on any of these, it will take you into the list, excuse me, the listings of the videos for that series. So all these things are coming from org mode files, and I'll show you, excuse me, I'll show you what I had to do to get all that set up. Yeah, the one thing you're missing here, since I'm using Qt browser and the URL is in the lower corner of the screen behind my webcam, is that the URLs actually are, I don't know what you call this style of URL, but basically it doesn't have an HTML extension at the end of it. Let me just pull up one of these quickly and I'll explain what I mean. Maybe if I go to the Essential series and then click on Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs. Oh, no, that went to the video. Sorry for that. Let's see, systemcrafters.cc. I'll get it pulled up here in a second. Okay, so we'll go to the other video I know that is in the new format. That's the one for the Geeks series. So I'll copy the link for this page. Jeez, okay, I need to update that. Anyway, the links basically look like this now. So if I paste this in, you can see that it's systemcrafters.cc/crafter system with geeks / an introduction to geeks with a slash at the end, no .html. So that's another thing that we can do sort of custom in the site generation. And we'll show the publish.el file now basically to show how to do that. Let me actually take a look at the chat here really quickly. Let's see, where are the styles from? Any recommendations on styling or where to get them? So what I used for this, which I'm planning to change slightly, is I started with a Bootstrap Css template. I don't really know exactly what you would call it. It's like maybe a framework, CSS framework called Bootstrap. A lot of people know Bootstrap. And it basically provides you with a basic CSS sort of system for doing responsive web layouts, plus some other what you might call UI elements and whatnot. But I took basically their system and then made the layout for my page and then customized it with more CSS that I wrote. So I basically, I picked the colors, I picked the layout of everything. So basically what you really need for a good static website, in my opinion, is a good basic CSS framework that allows you to do responsive page layouts so that the text zooms correctly based on the size of the screen of the user, and then allows you to put things on the screen in the right places and have it be organized correctly. And also can manage typography a little bit for making your fonts look good and be able to scale them relative to each other. So it actually isn't that hard to set that up, and I think I'll do a video in the future to show basically how to make a nice looking static web page without having to know much about HTML and CSS. TRDV asks, can you do a video on Acme? I don't know what Acme is. Can you tell me what it is? All right, so there's a few things I want to show you about how this works. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the code for, let's look at the System Crafter site first, because I think that's the one I've been updating most recently, and we're going to work on that today. Avocadora says, you don't need a Bootstrap for a personal site, just use Flexbox and Grid CSS and some media queries. Yeah, you probably don't if you actually know CSS. I know some CSS, but I'm not an expert on it, so I have to get some help from people who know more than I do. Okay, so we're going to look at publish.el here. So this is basically the file that I'm using for publishing all of these websites. And the nice thing about this file is that you don't have to load it into your current Emacs session to use it. I actually use this as a script. I use the batch mode of Emacs to execute this using no configuration aside from what is currently in this script. That basically means it's not taking anything from my own Emacs configuration. It's basically just a standalone script that can be run both on my own machine and on a build system, like if you use GitHub Actions or if you use Sourcehut's build system. You can run this basically standalone just with plain Emacs. You don't need anything else aside from what's already in Emacs and then the packages that get this installed as part of the script. If you get past the license header here, I should also mention, I ripped off this script from Pierre Neidhart, who has a really excellent blog on Emacs at ambrevard.xyz. So you should go check out his blog. Actually, Pierre was a big inspiration for me, maybe back in probably 2018. He kind of convinced me through his blog post to get into using EXWM and eShell and a lot of other things like in Emacs. So if you want to have some more good inspiration for using things in Emacs, definitely check out Pierre's blog. But basically, I took the starting point of his script that he uses to generate his website and then tweaked it to my needs, basically. This is quite different now than what he had before, I think. So this is all GPL, I think, was it V3? Yeah, V3 or higher. So if you want to take this script, just make sure that you license it also as GPL3, which is not a big deal because it's just a script to generate your website. So generally, the command that I'm using to run this script is this command here. It's Emacs-Q --batch, which turns on batch mode, which is basically meant for running scripts. -L for this publish.el file, which basically loads this EL file into Emacs whenever it starts. And then this fun call parameter, which causes the dw/publish function to be executed after that file gets loaded in. So very self-contained. You can run this on the command line. It won't connect to your existing Emacs server session if you have an Emacs server or daemon running. So it's completely standalone on your system, even if you have Emacs open already. So first of all, what I'm doing here, I should also mention too, this is not to be considered a tutorial. I'm gonna make an actual video at some point in the future about how to do this sort of from scratch, so you don't have to like fully try to use this as a tutorial. We're sort of just doing show and tell here just to give you some context and maybe inspire you to try it yourself. So back to the point. So first of all, I'm using package.el here. I'm requiring it to make sure that it's available so that I can start installing dependency packages, because there are a couple things that I want to install here that are needed to generate the site correctly. Then one thing that I do that's very important is I change the package user directory to move the location where these packages will be installed, because I don't want package.el to be using my own Emacs packages, and I don't want these packages to sort of get mixed in with my own Emacs packages if I'm using package.el. So what this does is it basically uses uses expand file name to expand the local .packages path to put it in the current directory. So wherever the script is being run, it's going to create a directory called .packages and install the dependencies there. Then I just set up the normal package archives. Maybe this is not even needed. I wonder what the default value is for this. I think Melpa is needed there. Okay, so it's GNU by default. But I'm setting it to Melpa and Elpa here because we sort of need Melpa for a couple of the things. Then the typical, setting up use package and package.el. We're refreshing the contents of the package archive, and then we're installing use package. That's all great, all standard Emacs config stuff. Now we get into the more interesting dependencies for this. So first of all, we're installing a package called ESXML. This is a very interesting package, and you're going to see why in a little bit. If you've ever used a scheme dialect before and tried to do some HTML with that, you've probably seen SXML before. It basically allows you to write HTML, but using S expressions, or basically the parenthesized lists that you see all the time in Lisp, to do the HTML syntax instead of using strings. So this basically gives us the ability to template our HTML for the page using Lisp instead of actual HTML, which is kind of nice, actually. Then I'm also pulling in this OX Slim HTML package. So the interesting thing about the default publish backend in org mode is, or for HTML at least, is that it generates a lot of really weird HTML, like XHTML or something. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff it puts in there that many people don't really want in a site. And if you've ever tried to generate HTML from Emacs before, you've probably seen this and wondered what it's doing. So Benoit asked about this in the Discord before the stream started, basically saying that he had tried to generate a site using Emacs and org publish before, and it spit out all kinds of weird HTML tags. Well, what you can do is change out the backend for generation for org publish to make it do whatever you want, basically. And this OX Slim HTML package actually has a more sane, I guess you would say, output for HTML. So I'm using that as a basis, but I'm also customizing its behavior. So you can write your own backend completely to generate HTML exactly how you want, or you can use this as a starting point and then customize the different types of things that it does. And we'll show a little bit more about that in a minute as well. I'm also using the HTMLize package, and what this does is it does basically syntax highlighting for the code that gets generated inside of your org mode documents. Now, this doesn't actually color, well, it can color the code in place. It can insert CSS in line, but actually the more interesting thing to do is just to have it write out the code on the page with tags that have CSS classes that then can be used from the colors that you have in your Emacs config. I'll show what that looks like in a bit, but basically what you can do is have your code on your website actually use the same color theme as what you use when you're editing your code every day, and that's kind of awesome, actually. Lastly, we have the web feeder package, which we actually don't use in this configuration, but I use it for my personal site. And that is for generating an RSS or Atom feed from your pages. So I think there's some built-in behavior for generating RSS feeds from org mode, but I don't think it was that good, or there's something about it that people generally don't like. And Pierre Neidhart, who I mentioned before, actually wrote this web feeder package and to solve some of those problems, and it's been working pretty well for me in the past. So I've got this set up in the config as well. So finally, we load up the OX publish package, which is built in, is part of org mode, is basically the publishing system for org mode. And now we get into the actual code. So some of the stuff here is just basic configuration of org publish and org export. One thing that I do at the top is I basically set variables for like the title of the site and maybe the tagline for the site. I don't use a tagline here, but I do in some of the other pages that I have set up. And then there's some other things here that are variables that are interesting for the publishing process. Some of the things like org export use Babel. We're not going to explain all of these, but some of these are kind of interesting. So if you try to export your pages and they have code blocks in them, if you don't have this set to nil, it will actually try to execute all those code blocks, and that might not be what you want. So that's something that you will probably want in general if you have a blog that has code in it. TRDV, if you actually run a play dev urandom, I think that you're going to have a hard time. So hopefully you're not recommending that other people do that. Ramses asks, what is tagline? Tagline, if you look at my config site, config.davidwill.com, you'll see that there's this little string over here to the right, the path to Nirvana, basically. That's the tagline, basically. It's basically just like the secondary title to the site, as opposed to like the main title, which in this case is the home/davidwill/.files. What else? There's smart quotes, which actually improves the look of quotation marks in the output. I think some of these actually might be overridden by the backend you choose, so some of this may not actually be necessary for the backend that I'm using. So I need to check some of these things to make sure I actually need to set them, because some of them may not need to be set at all. Export with sub and superscripts. I mean, some of this is just basically general formatting things that may or may not be needed. Export with table of contents. I've got this set to true, but it actually doesn't generate, and I think it's because the backend that I'm using. Rex Suter asks, have you done any videos on writing your own custom modes? That's going to come in the Learning Emacs Lisp series, probably in the next 2 or 3 videos, maybe. I think we're going to do that. Make backup files to nil. We don't need backup files because we're basically just using this for static generation, so definitely don't generate those. Okay, so now we're getting to the more interesting part here, where I have functions for generating the header and the footer of the website, but I'm using this ESXML package to do that. So in this case, I'm basically generating a lot of different div elements here. So if you know anything about HTML, divs are used quite often for sort of the layout of a page to put things in containers and then organize them. And in this case, I have some nested divs, and then you can use this @ symbol to then start setting attributes on the element before. So in this case, we have a div, and then this @ says, all right, well, now we're setting attributes, and we're setting the class attribute to blog header. And then now we have a nested div inside of this parent div that has its own class being set for container, etc., etc. So if you've ever looked at HTML, then this will look pretty, excuse me, this will look pretty similar to what you're used to, but the difference is now that it's being written in Lisp expressions. The benefit here is that you basically get templating for free if you know anything about how backquoting works in Lisp expressions. So basically this little backtick or grave character that's right before this expression basically turns this into a templated expression. And then anytime you see the comma before a symbol inside of this expression, basically what that means is it's going to insert the value of whatever comes next into that list. So this basically turns this into a template, and then this uses my DW site title to put that value into the template to make the output HTML basically. And we're wrapping this whole expression inside of the call to sxml to xml, which then will take this eLisp expression and then turn that into an HTML string. So basically, the point of DW site header is to turn whatever it does into a string of HTML that then gets used inside of the site generation. Same thing for the DW site footer function, which basically does the footer part, like the lowest part of the site. So the header is the top part of the site, and the footer is the bottom part of the site. So what we're doing basically, we're setting up the layout of the page. The header will sort of establish the contents of the site, and then the footer will sort of close everything off at the end, I think. So, excuse me. So the same thing here, we're calling sxml to xml with this body of Emacs Lisp expressions to generate HTML for this part. So the interesting thing we're doing here is that we are using this expression to pass in the creator information. So for both of these functions, there's an info parameter that's passed in, and basically this is the information that's coming from org mode about the export process. In this case, the creator property inside this list, info itself is a plist, a property list. If you remember from the Learning Emacs Lisp series, a plist is basically a list that has keys and values sort of in order, pairs of them in order that you can just sort of extract them by just finding the key and then grabbing the next item from that list. So we're grabbing the creator key, the value of the creator key from that list, and then putting it in. And that's what gives us this thing at the bottom of the page that tells us that it was made with Emacs 27.1, org mode 9.3. So that's automatically generated by org mode to say the Emacs version and the org mode version used to generate this page. So I can get this basically for free. I don't have to put that in myself. So basically anything that you can calculate using Emacs Lisp can be put into your template like this. Some people might prefer to use some other kind of templating system for generating the HTML parts of their page. But personally, I like this approach a lot better because it allows you to use the power of Lisp to template things however you want, and also to just use the normal code that you're used to writing in Emacs to get all the content for your site and prepare it to be displayed on the page. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for the header and footer parts. So the way this all sort of comes together, I'm going to skip one thing here. I had this dw.org HTML template function, and this is sort of like the overall template for each page. You can see here that we start with like a doc type HTML, which says this is an HTML5 page. And then we have the overall HTML element inside of the document that basically gives a whole structure. So now we're getting into like the actual full structure of the page. And we are adding like the meta tags, the link tags for our CSS files. So this is where all those CSS things are getting pulled in. I'm pulling in style sheets for the fonts that I use, and also my own personal style sheets that are being applied as well. And this is also where I'm setting the title of each page, because I'm setting title inside of the HTML document as you normally would. And I'm pulling that data out of the info, which is for each document. Basically, the title of the org mode document will come back from this title property. So I can make a title of the page with the org mode document title, and then append system crafters to the end to have it be sort of connected to the website itself. And then inside the body, I call the function for DW site header. So I'm calling that myself to say what the header information is. And then I have some more content basically here that gives a listing of all, let's see. Yeah, this is basically the title of the post, the metadata for the post, all the other information we basically need for the contents. And then there's the contents variable. This actually comes from here. So contents gets passed in by org mode to this function. And then that gets put directly in the center, basically. So this is where the content goes, like right here in the middle of this whole template, basically. And then we continue on with like writing out the tags of the file, and then maybe some information about whether this is an article. And then we can write out things about like how to give comments on that, basically. And then we finish it off by writing out the site footer. So basically this whole function defines the entire template for the page. Now, if you wanted to have different templates for different pages, you could definitely do that. I believe that if you use the same strategy that I'm using, let's see, where was it? Yeah, page type. I don't know if I'm writing that in there or if it's coming from the section of the publish configuration, but basically you can do logic inside of this function to decide which template to use. So if you have a different type of page that you wanted to use a different template on, you could easily do that in this code because it's just code. You can decide however you want to do things here. So hopefully you can see that this gives you complete control over how you're going to lay your own pages out, and then you can do whatever arbitrary logic you want basically to make those decisions and show anything that you want to on the page. So now we're going to look at some other functions that I'm using for customizing certain things. But before we get into that, I think it's better to go look at the actual configuration for how this all comes together. So if you've ever used the publish system before in org mode, you've probably seen this org publish project A list. So org publish project A list is basically a list of publishing projects that org will use whenever you tell it to publish. And generally you're calling this org publish all function, or maybe some variant of that to publish your projects. But this list is actually where you're defining what the project is to be published. Now the documentation for this has a lot of information basically about what the properties are that you go put in here. So that's very useful to look at if you want to learn more about how to configure this properly. But for my own project here, you can see that there's a couple things involved. I have a recursive setting, so it needs to go from that root folder here, from base directory. So I'm looking in the content folder. If you look at the site here, basically the folder listing for this site is basically just publish.el and then the content folder, and then there's a bunch of subfolders that have their own org mode files in them. So I want it to do that recursively. I want it to navigate that folder hierarchy and generate out all of the org files that are inside of that hierarchy. And base extension here says basically which type of files we're looking for. In our case, we're only looking for org files, so we're going to use base extension of org here. And also there's the output directory of where the files should be written, the output HTML files. So in this case, our publishing directory is public. So it's not there yet because we haven't actually run the publish process. Actually, I need to copy something over first to make that work, but we'll do that in a second. Also, with timestamps with title, those might not be needed because the backend I'm using may not necessitate it. And the publishing function is also interesting, useful, because that basically tells org mode how to publish this content for this project. In this case, we're using org HTML publish to HTML, and this is a specific function that comes with org mode in ox.html.el for publishing an org project, basically. So this will get called for each org file that comes through in the publish project. Now, in some cases, you will have multiple entries here. So maybe for your articles, like maybe for your main site pages that aren't articles, like a blog, you'll have one section. And then for your section of articles, you'll have a different configuration. So if I actually go look at my davidwool.com page configuration, and I go into the publish.el for that file, so we're in a different publish.el right now, you'll see that I have two here. I actually have the main for davidwool.com. Then I have the static for davidwool.com. Actually, that's probably misnamed. Oh, actually, it's named incorrectly, interestingly. So this should be articles. So the base directory is different. The files we're looking for are different. And yeah, there's also a publishing function that, oh, no, that is static files, actually. Okay, this is wrong at the moment, but let's not worry too much about that. But basically, since I have two different sections here, there's actually a third section for articles here. I forgot about that. Then you need to have a listing for the site that has the components that come as part of that. We're not going to pay too much attention to that right now because we're not doing a tutorial, but just know that if you use this org publish project a list, you're basically defining configurations for each part of your site. And then at the end, you have to say your entire site is comprised of these components that you listed before so that it will generate all of these. I think the reason why is because you can have multiple published projects listed in this A list, and I think they can all have different names, and you could probably pick which project you want to publish based on the name. So in my case, I'm not doing that because I don't want my publish script to be part of my Emacs config. I want it to be a standalone script. So in this case, we only see the things that are relevant to the site that we're publishing here in this publish.el file. All right, so now we're back to the publish.el for systemcrafters.cc. And let's move on to the configuration for exporting HTML. So we have a few things here for the HTML output configuration. However, I think that some of these things aren't being used because I've changed the publishing backend. So the preamble and post-amble functions here are the site header and footer functions as you would expect. But I think that as you saw in my template function before, we're not actually, these aren't being called from this configuration. They're actually being called from that template function. And we'll show how that works in a second. We also have some other formatting strings for like timestamps, checkbox types, which probably isn't relevant. Fancy HTML5, I think that may account for some of the weird output that comes out of the default HTML exporter. One thing that is very necessary here for the site that we're doing right now is this HTMLized output type setting. So as I mentioned before, HTMLize is able to generate the HTML to enable syntax coloring for code that's in your org mode files. So this HTMLized output type, let me split this window to see if it will put the help there instead. Okay, so, wait, that's the wrong one. HV. Yeah, okay, so org HTMLized output type has a few different settings. One is CSS and the other is inline CSS. So inline CSS will actually generate the CSS code to render your code for highlighting directly where it exports the code in the HTML output. This could be useful if you don't want to have a style sheet. If you literally just want to have a standalone HTML page that you pass to somebody and they can open it and see it, that could be useful. However, I think it's a lot of overhead to include it inline in the document because you're going to have a lot of extra text in the document that you don't really need. So if you use the CSS setting for this, which I do, then basically it depends on you including a CSS file that has the necessary CSS customization, excuse me, for the HTML elements that HTMLize is going to write out. Now, the way that you get that CSS file, you can basically generate that yourself. There is a function called org HTMLize generate CSS. Now, what this does is generate a CSS file for you from all of the face configurations in your current Emacs session. So basically, for all the colors that are set for every face in Emacs, it will actually generate a CSS file with all those settings. So if I run that, you'll see now that it's given us a buffer that's got some HTML output that actually has all the CSS there. You can actually take this body of the CSS and just move that into a normal .css file if you want to, which is basically what I did. But for all of the names of faces in Emacs, it basically writes out a CSS rule for each of those with all the colors that were being used inside of your Emacs theme. So since I'm using the Doom Pale Night theme, all of the colors here actually conform to what are in that theme, which is pretty awesome. This could also be a way for you to use your actual Emacs theme to theme, excuse me, to theme your entire website. So if you know what faces are being used for certain UI elements in Emacs, you can basically just pull those colors from the CSS file just using the names of the rules in the file, and then use those directly in your website. So if you want to make your site look just like your Emacs, it's very easy to do with this CSS output. So if you look at the, interesting. Oh, yeah, okay, so I need to do one thing really quickly. Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is gonna be a problem, I think. So what I'm gonna do is pull over the public folder from davidwill.com. Let me go into the site folder here. I'm gonna copy recursively /davidwill.com/public. So for, I'm sorry. For all three of the websites, I'm basically pulling in the same CSS and font files for all three, but I've only checked them into one repository. So what I'm doing is copying over the public directory, which has all of those files, into this current directory for site. So now if you look at site, I have content public publish.el, and the public folder only has the JavaScript fonts and CSS needed for the template. So if I look into the, let me close this. If I look into that folder for public, CSS, and then code.css, you'll basically see all those same styles that just got generated from the function that we ran, the org HTML, HTMLize generate CSS. So now I basically just copied and pasted those into a file, and then you can see inside of publish.el that I'm actually loading those into one of the style sheet links into the top of the file. So we're basically just taking what Emacs outputted and putting it directly into our page. And now any of the HTMLize generated source code blocks will pick up all those colors and then use them on the page whenever I have source code. So you can see, let's see, on my configuration site, if we go down to, yeah, this XML block, basically all the tags here are colored the way that they would be inside of Emacs. If we were to go into the document for that, so FTD for desktop, we'll look at, let's see, where was that at? Yeah, right here. So basically all this should be colored exactly the same in the website. So you have this blue color. Now this is missing. That's kind of interesting that this didn't get colored the same way, but the tags are all being colored the same way. So maybe there's a little bit of variance here. I don't know exactly what the rules are with the HTMLize package, but maybe some things won't be exactly the same, but most things will be. I guess maybe that's not entirely true in some cases, because even here you can see it's not exactly the same, but yeah, like I said, I don't really know what the rules are. Maybe there's some setting I need to set to expand the types of things that are being colored. So something to keep in mind. All right. What else did I want to show there? All right, so the other big thing about this is the publishing backend. So I mentioned that if you don't use a different publishing backend, then you get a lot of really weird output for your HTML. Let me see if I can tell where this is coming from. Site HTML. Okay. So, okay. So org HTML published to HTML. Apparently, I've defined this here. Is that really right? Org HTML publish. So interestingly, it seems that I've overwritten a function, which doesn't make any sense. I don't know why I did that. I could have just used my own function to begin with. Like I said, I copied and pasted this code to start with a couple years ago, so I haven't really gone back and sort of reevaluated some of the things I did here. So this doesn't really make any sense what I did. I basically overrode the org HTML publish to HTML function. You can see the default configuration for that here, which basically is just a very simple org publish to, and then the HTML symbol, and then the file name. So what I'm doing here, I've added a little bit of extra logic before that. I'll tell you why in a second. And I'm still doing the same call to org publish org to, but in this case, I'm using site-html instead of HTML. And the reason why is because I've actually defined my own export backend. And the quote HTML one that you saw before is the default HTML export backend. But now I'm using my own that I've defined, which actually derives from the slim HTML export backend. So if you look up OX slim HTML, this is like a whole package which has an entire implementation of a org publish backend for HTML that's a lot simpler than the one that's built in. So you can go and look at the code for this. It all looks very straightforward because there's nothing that fancy about it. It actually tries to generate very straightforward HTML based on all the different types of things that you would find in an org mode file. So in my case, what I've done is I've derived from that. So basically meaning I've inherited all of the behavior from that export backend, but now I'm actually overriding certain parts of it. So in this case, I'm overriding the overall template for the file, which is that template function we saw before that basically writes out the entire structure of the file. So I've got control over the entire page template by doing that. And I'm also overriding the export of a few different types of elements. So the way this system works for publishing backends is that you have to have a list of functions that translate a particular type of org mode element into output. So in the case of HTML files, what you're taking is like the template of the file, which is like basically saying, here's the overall template for the file when org tries to publish something. You give it a function that can give you the overall structure of the file. And then everything else here, like link, in this case, it will, for every link, it's going to call this org HTML link function to say how to write that out to the exported file. The nice thing about this is you have 100% control over what gets exported. So if you wanted to write your own entire custom export backend for your site to have everything exactly the way you want it, you can do that pretty easily, I think. I mean, if you look at the code for the slim HTML backend, I mean, it's about 600 lines of code, but a lot of this probably isn't needed because you may not even be using some of these types of elements inside of your org mode files. So you could slim this down to the exact things that you care about from org mode and have probably maybe even a 300 line file instead or less than that. I'm actually planning to do this for my sites eventually. I'm going to pare this down to the bare essentials of the things that I care about and then use that for generating all of my pages, because there's really no reason to use something else whenever you can just do it all yourself and have full control and then understand everything. Basically, you understand the entire process end to end. Whoops. Sorry for the noise there. Yeah, I bumped my microphone the wrong way. Okay, so let's see what else here. There's also a couple of options you can put in here. I don't know if they're even necessary. I'm not sure why I put these in. I didn't leave any comments to tell myself why I put them in. The info.js thing is kind of interesting because I think if you turn that on, it will try to generate like navigation bar or something in your website, which maybe only makes sense if you're generating a documentation page or maybe a presentation, but it's not necessary. And in fact, probably a lot of these options that I'm setting inside of in org mode, org publish, org export, etc., aren't even needed if you write your own custom backend, because you're basically just going to ignore all of those whenever you write out things yourself. So maybe the ideal strategy is just to have my own set of functions for translating the document, and then I don't need to worry about setting any settings, and this whole script becomes a lot simpler if I do that. All right, so let's look at one of these other functions for overriding something in the document. Let's look at links. So we'll go to the org HTML link function. I want to say thanks to Ashraz from the System Crafters Discord for helping me out with this. I think that someone reported that I had an issue with the output of my page where the links weren't being generated correctly, and Ashraz came up with a quick fix that that fixed that problem, which was pretty awesome. So basically, this just customizes how HTML links are being generated in the page, and it does some extra translation because of what I'm doing to the links whenever I generate the pages themselves. So as you noticed before, as I mentioned before, the way that we generate these pages actually causes the documents to not have HTML on the end of the links. So it sort of breaks the default assumption about how pages are being generated. And another thing that I'm doing is I'm lowercasing all of the file names. So if any file name that I'm generating to HTML has uppercase characters, those now get changed to lowercase characters. So if I happen to link between two of my org files, inside the org file, it's going to be looking for the file with a capitalized name, but then in the actual generated output, that name is going to be lowercase. So we actually had to use this customization of org HTML link to lowercase those links whenever they're being written out. So that's what's actually happening here, where we're basically saying org element put property. We're replacing the link property in this element, and then we're downcasing the string that comes back from file name sans extension org element property. So this basically just allows us to change how links are being written out to follow the system of our website, the way that we've set up our website. The other interesting thing here is that we're checking to see if the link type is file. So any HTTP links are not going to be touched by this. Only file links that are like direct file references between files. So you have a lot of control over how you're processing this input, because you have all the information from org mode at your fingertips for every element that you're looking at, like all the properties, anything else that may be attached to it, tags, etc. You can do anything you want. So let's say, for instance, you want to override the way the headings are written out. You could actually skip headings that had a certain tag or had like a to-do label on them or anything like that pretty easily just by using some logic inside of the function for translating that type of org element. And if anybody has any questions at any time, please stop me and ask, because I don't know if I've just mesmerized you completely, but I think that people are sort of either bored or just sort of watching it and absorbing things. So, I'm also doing some, hey Glenn, also doing some translation to org HTML headline. Let's see, I think I've basically copied that function and changed some stuff here. Oh, no, I haven't actually done anything with this yet, but I do want to do something with this. So that's something we'll get into in a minute. And the other one was code. Yeah, that one's not very interesting. So basically, that's the high-level overview of how all this works. We basically have just one file of Emacs Lisp that's about 300 lines, and we have total control over how we export everything, and we also have our HTML templatization done with Lisp expressions and not with HTML itself, which I think is pretty awesome. The other nice thing is that you can actually insert regular HTML anywhere you want in this. So if you can see here that I actually did a little bit here. I actually have a literal string for this comment character and another one here. So basically, if you need to put real HTML in for whatever reason, like you have something you need to insert, like maybe, well, I was gonna say like maybe like a Google Analytics tag or something, but let's not let's not just say that's a good idea. So anything that you need to put in verbatim, you can do that pretty easily. Ahmed asks, what do you think about the creator of Doom Emacs saying that Doom Emacs is unstable to be used as a window manager? I don't think that I agree that it's too unstable. I find it perfectly stable. I use it every day. I mean, okay, yes, maybe Emacs crashes from time to time, but that's very rare for me. And I don't know. I mean, some people have different definitions of stability than I do. I'm a little bit more lenient when it comes to things because I know what I'm getting out of the equation. But if Henrik thinks that maybe it's not so stable, then that's his opinion. It's totally fine. I mean, he may like using another window manager instead. I watched a bit of that interview. I think he said he used maybe i3 or something. I don't know, but I don't know. Hey Anders, well, now we're having more fun now that you showed up. Alpha Beta asks, why are there so many shortcuts for the same thing? Do you recommend starting out with Doom? I don't know. I mean, there's different contexts where you would want to use the same key binding. I don't know. Starting out with Doom, sure. I mean, this is a great starting point if you wanted to have a fully customized Emacs to try. So let's keep the questions, the general questions, to later. We can do that Q&A session later. Thoughts on Systemd, Emoji D? I don't use Systemd. I use Shepherd because I use GNU Geeks. Garjola, the time changed in the U.S. over the weekend, so the difference between time in the U.S. and India right now is different by 1 hour. So it seems earlier for you today. Okay, so let's see, what else have we got here? I think that's it for the overall sort of how this works from the generation standpoint. Now I'll actually generate the site so you can see it happening locally, and I'll show you how I test this locally before I publish it. Let's see. Tomas says that his colleague's Emacs just crashed during today's show and tell session. Probably the first time in 3 months. So yeah, that happens sometimes. It can happen depending on what types of things you're doing. Oh, Emacs 28, I mean, yeah, that's more likely to crash because it's still in development, especially if you're using native comp. Okay, so what I was trying to do here, oh jeez, okay. I'm ruining my window layouts. Let's use undo. Wow, undo really screwed me there. Okay, let me fix this. Sorry for that. Vertical split. No, Biden didn't get in and start changing the time. This is what the US has been doing forever now. Sorry, I gotta fix my window layouts here. Now you get to see my very ugly looking Hydra for resizing windows. Okay, let me do this right this time. Let's do horizontal split. Okay, great. So I'm gonna load up my shell, and inside of this folder, I'm gonna run that command that I told you about before, which is, let me pull back up publish.el. That is the Emacs -q batch blah blah blah. So I'll paste this in, and then I'm gonna run it. Now, what it's going to do is start pulling down the package repositories for Melpa and Elpa, and once it gets those in, it's going to start syncing the dependencies for this script, and then once it finishes syncing, it's basically going to start writing out all the files for this site. So it finished, everything ran, no problems. And if we go look at the folder now, if I refresh this, go into public, we'll see now we have all these output folders with HTML files. So basically it generated all these files whenever I ran that script. And if I wanted to demo those files, I can actually use a package, hopefully it's loaded here, use a function called httpd -serve directory. If I run that, it's going to ask me which directory. I'm going to tell it this public directory and press enter. And now what it did is it started up an HTML server running inside of Emacs on port 8080. So if I go into the browser and open localhost :8080, it's going to pull up my local development copy. Let's see. Oh, I typed it in wrong. Localhost 8080. Now we can see the local development version of the site. And it has all the same stuff since all of those HTML pages have been generated out the same way as what you saw on systemcrafters.cc. To prove to you that this is actually a live version of the site, I'm going to go into the index, let's see, content/index.org, and hey, it's working. I'm going to add some text there, and then I will go regenerate the site again. This time, it won't actually pull all those dependencies down because they're already there. It's just going to regenerate the site files, and then I can go and refresh this page, and you can see, hey, it's working. So you have the ability to regenerate and look at the output of your site every time that you change it. Now, if you have a lot of org mode files, it could take time to regenerate these every single time. I think there might be some ways to deal with that, but I haven't looked into it in a while, so it hasn't been a problem for me, so it hasn't been a problem that I've tried to solve. I think there's some kind of cache that it uses to not regenerate things, but I would have to look at it to see for sure. So yeah, that's basically it. Let's see, let me go to this. So the package that I'm using for that is called Emacs Web Server. That's basically what gives me that ability to have a web server hosting static files from within Emacs. Let's see if I can jump to that page really quickly. So that is maintained by Skewer, who's also the person who wrote Elfeed. I think someone else wrote it originally, but then Skewer took it forward. So yeah, if you go and install this package, you'll be able to host HTML files inside of Emacs and then look at them from a browser. There's also a couple other really cool packages built on this. One of them is, I think, Impatient Mode, which will automatically reload the contents of the pages. I don't know why this is set to be archived now. Maybe the guy didn't decide, or decided that they didn't want to maintain it anymore. There's also Skewer Mode, which is, oh, maybe this is the newer thing now. Skewer Mode is basically a way to live preview HTML inside of Emacs. So I've used it a little bit in the past. It's very helpful if you're tweaking like a template for an HTML site or CSS site. You can change the CSS and HTML and it will automatically update the page live without you having to restart it. So that can be really helpful for tweaking your CSS files and trying them out. But we haven't actually set that up to be used today, so I can't show it to you. When we do an actual video or maybe video series about making your own website with Emacs, we'll show how to use all these things. Okay, so I think there's a couple other really cool things that I can show you. First of all, the build definition. So we mentioned that this site is being generated and published on Sourcehut. So I'm not actually doing that manually. I don't publish it from my local machine. What I'm actually doing is writing the org mode files and writing the code for publishing the site locally on my machine, and then I test it using the approach that I just showed you with the HTTPD server. And whenever I'm happy with the content or happy with how it looks, I then just make a commit to the repository that this site is stored in, and then this build definition runs on Sourcehut. It's actually very simple. If you've ever used any other continuous integration site, like let's say AppVeyor or CircleCI or Travis CI, etc., this is probably slightly simpler than those that you've seen before in the past. GitHub Actions can be pretty simple like this too, but I think Sourcehut is a pretty awesome implementation for this. So basically what we're doing here is we're starting with an Arch Linux image because it's sort of like the canonical image. That or Alpine, I think, are the canonical images on Sourcehut. And then I install the Emacs NoX package. So in Arch Linux, this package actually has the build of Emacs that's only terminal mode, doesn't pull in any of the extra stuff for like UI elements, etc. And that saves you a lot of time on install because you don't pull in all this extra stuff that you don't need, basically. You're not going to load graphical Emacs for this. You don't have to, so you might as well just pull in the non-graphical version of Emacs. Also, we're using this OAuth field, and basically what this says is that for this build, generate a token that this build can use to publish a site to pages.sr.ht. So this sort of automates that process of getting a token for you for your account. And then one cool thing about this is that it makes it very easy to pull multiple repositories. So what we're doing here is pulling the repository for the System Crafter site, and I'm also pulling the repository for my personal website, davidwill.com. And the reason why is because the davidwill.com repo is the one that contains all of the JavaScript, CSS, and font files that I use for all of these sites. So if I pull that repo also, I can copy those files over instead of having to have them checked into all three repositories. So it just saves me some time and saves duplication. I don't have to go update those files in 3 places every time that I want to change them. And then I'm basically setting an environment variable saying that the site is systemcrafters.cc. And then that environment variable gets used in the actual build scripts below. So basically what I'm doing is that I have 2 tasks here. One is for building the site, and this is a normal bash script. We're just saying we're CDing into the site folder because it clones that site repository into the folder called site. I CD into that. I copy the files from the davidwill.com/public folder into the current directory, and then I just run that same Emacs batch command that we saw before to generate the site. Nothing different at all. It just uses plain old Emacs to run the whole generation. And now I'll CD into that public page, public folder, and then zip all that stuff up into one tar.gz file that I can use to upload. And then finally, the next step is to use this acurl command, which is basically a wrapper on Sourcehut for curl that puts in the token automatically for this build. And I'm basically telling it to publish to my site, which is systemcrafters.cc, that site content file that I've packaged up. So very simple process. It's literally you just build the output files, you package them up, and then you use curl to upload them to the service for Sourcehut pages, and then it makes it live immediately. So in my opinion, this is actually a lot easier than what you would do on GitHub Pages to accomplish the same thing. If you've ever used GitHub Pages for static site hosting before, For your own personal repository, basically the one for your username.github.io, you have to use the GH pages branch. So you basically have to switch branches to check in the HTML files for your site. But that's only if you're using a custom static site generator. If you're using Jekyll, the one that's built in, I think it does it automatically for you. You don't have to do anything special. But if you're like me and you don't want to use Jekyll, you want to use Emacs or something else that is a known site generator. I see somebody mentioning Haunt in the chat. That's another one. Then you need to use the GH pages branch. So there's like extra complication in pushing your changes to your website. It's not the same for other repositories or maybe even organization repositories, because there's like the way that you can put it into the docs folder. But that helps, but it's still not the same because you're having to check in the output files into your repository. At least in this case, you're not checking in the output files. You're actually just uploading a tar.gz containing all the site contents to Sourcehut, and then they can take them and upload them from there. And from what I've seen so far, you can basically upload to any domain that you want. So if you, here I'm uploading for systemcrafters.cc. I'm basically telling pages.sr.ht, take this tar.gz, and if anybody asks you for the pages for systemcrafters.cc, then give them the site that I've given you, basically. And the way that you set that up in the end is that you change your DNS records to point to Sourcehut. So if I go to Sourcehut pages documentation, they have a very, very simple explanation on how to do that. Let me pull it up really quickly. Custom domains. So basically, if you have a custom domain, you just go add an A record to your DNS entries on your domain just for this IP address, and that's it. That's it. For GitHub, you have to add like 4 of these, and then maybe like a CNAME file and other stuff like that. You don't have to do that for Sourcehut, which is nice. And also, if you're publishing to the default URL for your site, which is your username.srht.site, you don't have to do this at all because you're not using a custom domain. It just works automatically. So just keep in mind that you do have the ability to publish for basically any URL that you own, and you can point it to Sourcehut. You can publish those sites. So you can do any number of sites as far as I know, so long as you stay within like 1 gigabyte. So Garjola asks, I don't get the advantage with respect to building the site locally and uploading to the server the local copy. Just that you don't have to do it yourself. I mean, it's just as simple as basically you making a commit to your repo and pushing it instead of having to run a script that does like rsync or SCP or something. Of course, it's fairly easy to do that yourself. I mean, if you already have the files locally, you can easily do the upload yourself to somewhere. I guess technically you could do it to Sourcehut pages. You could use the same kind of curl command basically if you use the right token to publish to Sourcehut locally from your own script. However, in my opinion, one benefit of doing this in CI is that you don't accidentally get any sort of leftover files that may be in your local folder. Like if you don't clean the folder before you rebuild it, you might upload some files you didn't intend to. I mean, it could be personal files that you don't want to be included, or it could just be stuff that doesn't really belong on the site. You might do that by accident doing it locally. If you use CI instead, then at least you know you have a completely clean system that you're starting from, and you're building it from scratch and then uploading it from there. So you know that at least it's reproducible. You know exactly what you're putting up on the site from that perspective. And I think that's it for the publishing section. Any questions on the whole Sourcehut side of things? I mean, I really recommend trying out Sourcehut if you want to do static site hosting. It's very smooth process. It took me maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour to get this build definition set up and working for 3 different websites, basically. And you can do a lot of stuff else with it, which is pretty awesome. So one other thing. For davywill.com, oh no, my .files repo. Let's go to the .files repo. So I also have a build.yml file here in the .files repo, and it has one extra step compared to the other sites. And this is to mirror my .files repo over to GitHub. So since I'm pushing primarily to Sourcehut now for my .files, but I still want to keep that GitHub repo up to date, so if people go find it there, they'll see all the same stuff. What I do is I've uploaded my my SSH key, or a special SSH key for doing this sort of cross-site upload, into Sourcehut's secrets thing, like the secrets feature basically. You can upload your SSH key there, and then If you do that, then you can pull that in using the secrets key ID basically, and it will automatically set it up as your SSH key inside of this sort of local VM that's being used for the build. And now what I'm doing is basically adding my GitHub repo as a remote, and I'm pushing it to master on GitHub. I had to do this extra little step here to make it accept the github.com host so that it wouldn't give an error that I couldn't actually clear, because it's actually a prompt that asks me yes or no. So using this line here basically it makes it so that it doesn't stop the script at this point. It just continues on. So this is just one little extra step here that allows me to mirror my dot files between two sites. I think it's kind of a nice benefit that you get by using a build definition for this. Garjola says, I use org static blog and have an eLisp function which builds and uploads. I mean, that's great. If you have that, that's a really nice thing to have. Martin asks, what would stop anyone from using the same URL in their CI but with their own HTML files? Could someone hijack your site? Yes, and it actually happened to me by me, basically. So whenever I was experimenting with getting systemcrafters.cc up, I ran the test build manifest using my own personal account, not the System Crafters account. And the way that I'm doing that is by going to builds.sr.ht. And one cool thing about Sourcehut's build system is that you don't actually have to commit a build configuration to Sourcehut to try it out. You can actually just go to the submit manifest page and just pass in anything here. You can just pass in a one-time build configuration that you just came up with out of nowhere and run it. Now, if you do that with publishing to a pages site for a given domain, you now own that domain on Sourcehut pages. So the actual owner who might want to publish to it can't publish to it anymore because a different account basically owns that domain. So what I had to do is contact Drew DeVault, who is the creator of Sourcehut, and ask him could he reassign the ownership to the System Crafters account. And he made me go and add an extra record to my domain to prove that I'm the owner of systemcrafters.cc. So if someone does this to you, if someone happens to squat on your domain on Sourcehut pages, just contact Drew. His contact information is all over the website. And then ask him, and he'll make you go through this process, basically confirming that you're the owner of the domain, and then he will assign ownership over to you. Now, it doesn't mean that if someone publishes to your domain that automatically that will be visible to the world, because you still have to change the DNS records of your domain to point to Sourcehut before that happens. So, so long as you own that domain and control where the name server records go to, then you're fine. Let's see, what else we got here, question-wise. Astrocat says, having it all locally also means if your service provider gets hacked, has a fire, etc., you still have everything all ready to copy to a new server. I mean, using this approach, you would still have that anyway, regardless of how you were publishing it, because you have the local copy of the Git repository, and you can generate the same pages, basically, at any given point in the history of the repository. Adnan says, is it possible to control font letter spacing in Emacs? That's a great question. I'm not sure. Let's see. Emacs font kerning. Yeah, I don't know if that's actually possible, but now that Emacs uses Harfbuzz, maybe it's possible. Who knows? There may be some sort of mystical stuff inside of Emacs that will allow you to control that. If somebody else knows, definitely say it in the chat or leave it in a comment to the video. Yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover for that specific topic. Let me go back to the file. Alpha Beta says, is there a Vim tutor equivalent that considers evil mode and teaches more about Emacs functionality apart from the Emacs default bindings? Not that I know of. There was the thing we mentioned last week, which is like, what was it called? There's basically a package that, yeah, Evil Motion Trainer. Evil Motion Trainer is not necessarily a tutorial. It's more like an electric shock machine that will force you to use the right motions by yelling at you whenever you use the wrong thing. So if you try to use arrow keys, or if you try to use the HJKL keys too much, it will basically yell at you and not let you use those keys. So that could be a good way to train yourself to use the right stuff. However, it's not really a tutorial per se. Evil mode tutorial. I don't know if there's a built-in tutorial. Let's see. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's an actual tutorial for that, but if you were to use the normal Vim tutor, I think a lot of the same things would apply. However, you were asking for things that are Emacs specific. The Emacs tutorial also might be helpful. It will show you Emacs key bindings that are not Vim key bindings, but it might also show you Emacs concepts too. Data student, also a Vim user here, would like to find a good guide to learning Emacs coming from Vim. Well, ultimately, I'm going to try to provide that in the Emacs Essentials series. Like I started it with the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs, but eventually we're going to get into Vim key bindings too at some point. Okay, so, oh, wow. So there's actually something I wanted to do, like some live coding in this, and I forgot about that, and I spent a lot of time talking about the implementation of things, but maybe we'll give this a shot for a second, since we do have some time left. And I just realized my phone is not even in here. Oh well. So, so there's a couple things I wanted to do in this output. One thing is I wanted to fix the header sizes inside of the output of the page. One thing you might notice, maybe you don't notice, maybe it's just me, but I think that the headings here are actually bigger than the title of the page. And if you were to go look at that, let's see, maybe if I open Firefox, then we can use the developer tools and see that. So if I go to systemcrafters.cc, all right. And then if I use the developer tools to inspect this element, then I think what I'm going to see here, let's turn on dark mode, if it lets me. Dark theme. Thank you. All right, so inspector. So video series here is an H1, but the actual title of the blog is H2, which is very strange to me. I don't know exactly why that got outputted that way, but I think what I want to do is try to change that. So let's go look at the functions for let's see, I'll keep this up a little bit, but let's look at publish.el for site. And then we're going to look at the heading function. We've already got one headline function here to override. So it's called headline in this case. We have org HTML headline. And let's see. So we have level here, which I believe is the heading level. And I think that's probably going to be a 1 through 5 kind of thing. And H here is also determining the level. So basically, this contents of this function I stole from OXSlim HTML so that I could just replace the behavior that comes with it. So in this case, I think this is where the H comes from. I don't see anywhere else in this function where the H is coming from. So I think right here is where I want to change this. And then this %D is the level information. So basically, if I change the value of level, it should change it in those two locations. So what I really want to do here is, I don't know if this is actually going to have a value. So I wonder if I can do a rebind inside of let star. It's kind of dirty to do that, but I can do that. Let's try it and see if it works. Oh, and by the way, I actually got Lispy working more or less correctly now. So we're going to be seeing Lispy in action a little bit here. All right, so I've copied this. So basically what I'm going to do is try to rebind level to something else. So let me delete this whole expression, and then I'm going to put in if level, then I want it to be +1 to increase it. Otherwise, well, you know, maybe even a when is fine here because it should return. Yeah, so when level +1. So let's just leave it at that. Maybe that's going to work. And maybe I can close this gap pretty quickly. So maybe if I put the cursor there. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so I think that's going to increase the level, but we'll see if let star allows me to rebind the value of level in this list. Maybe it will. Let's see. I'm going to try to run this now to regenerate the site. And so far, it seems the code is working. And if I go to the local page here, let's see, do I have that local one still up? Yeah, this is the one. So if I refresh this page, yeah, it looks like the headings did get affected, which is great. Let's see. So Matthew says, yeah, you can rebind on the line right below it, but why not call it +1? What I wonder is if level actually this may actually return nil. If it doesn't, then yeah, I could just do that. So 1+, doesn't it set the value in place, or is that just, oh yeah, okay. You're saying, should I just do that? Okay, yeah, that's fine too. We'll just rerun that and make sure it's working. And the other thing I'll have to do is change the document title to make the right headline, because I want that to be an actual H1 here, the actual title of the page. So let's see. What slim HTML? Let's see what would that be? Is it title? Just plain old title? HTML title. Example block headline, paragraph, plain text section, HTML title. Let's see what that says. HTML title. Title format. Okay, so plist get title. And this is coming in the template function. So you know what? I'm probably doing that in my own template. So let me check my template and see what the title is. Yep, there it is right there. This H2. So I'm going to change this to H1 and then regenerate the page. All right, and then if I go back to the development page, refresh it, now that appears to be an H1. If I go into Firefox, I can verify that, refresh the page. Oh, that's the wrong one, localhost 8080. Okay, now it seems to be switched to the right thing. I'm gonna inspect that element. Now this seems to be an H1, as we see here, and then the individual headlines are now H2, so that's good. And I think if I look at another page, like let's say if I look at one of the actual show notes files, I'll have some more subheadings in those that will allow me to see this in action. I think this is actually called introduction here. Introduction. I should fix that too while we're here. All right, so now, yeah, okay, great. So this is actually an H3 now, I think. If I inspect this, I should see that this is H3. Okay, great. So I think we're lining up the headlines the right way, and the coloring looks pretty good for these. I would probably actually change this a little bit to rotate the colors, but I wanted to make sure that the sizing made sense based on the hierarchy of the page. So as you can see, it was pretty easy to go and change how this whole site was being updated without having to do a whole lot of work. So let's see, what was the other thing I said that I wanted to do? Oh, let me fix that one file. Matthew says, you probably want to use Max somewhere to avoid H7. That's a great point. Let's check that out. See, this is why I like doing the live streams sometimes. It's just, you can get comments that you wouldn't get while doing it by yourself and actually add more value. So thanks Angry Bacon for that. All right, so let's see, is it just max? Let's see. Yeah, max, number, and then any other number. So we're gonna say max of 7, and then I'm gonna use this nifty little feature of Lispy. I'm gonna use shift and right angle bracket to move that cursor or that parentheses over to the end of the line there. I should turn on keycast, actually. Is it on? I don't actually see it. Why does it only show up in the bottom of the screen? That's lame. Oh, no, Osloy. I think you're right. That's actually going to be min. Min is the right function to use for that. Max is going to return 7 every time. Yep, you're right. Okay, so I'm going to regenerate that just to make sure everything is copacetic. All right, and we're going to refresh this page. Yep, everything still looks good. Great. So I also want to go and change that content on one of these pages. So if we go to content/craft/index, what I want to do here is change this link. So I'm just going to change the contents of this link to be introduction because I changed the organization of this page. So introduction, press enter, save that. And then I'll run this again. And then once that finishes, I should be able to go back to this main page here. Okay, that's done now. And then this link Once I refresh, it should be updated to be introduction, and now that's done, so that works correctly. So now I can go and commit these changes back to the site, because I do want these to really be there. I'm gonna commit this one, and this one, and then I will say fix title and heading tag sizes. I don't know, that's not really the right term, but we're gonna go with that. And then I'm gonna push it to the website. Actually, let's not push it. Let's do this other thing too. I'll get rid of that change. And then on this one, I'm gonna stage that and commit it. Fix link to Geek's introduction page. I'm gonna commit that. And then I'm gonna push this to the remote, which is origin. And it's gonna take just a second to push. And now the push is there. And now what we can do is we can go to builds.sr.ht and see the actual build getting kicked off. Oh, I'm not logged in? Okay, let me go to Qt browser. I think I'm logged in there. Builds.sr.ht. All right, so now you can see the list of builds, and this one seems to be active. So if I go to this one, it's basically showing me the run of the build configuration that I showed you before. And it's now installing Emacs, cloning repositories, it's running the script. You see it contacting Melpa to grab the packages, it's installing all the dependencies, and then it's publishing all the files. And then the next step is basically to package those and then start uploading them. So really this takes maybe, I don't know, a minute for this whole thing to finish. Let's see what happens. It should finish in probably a minute. The interesting thing about this page is I don't think it actually has JavaScript on it. It actually just reloads itself to refresh the status of the build. It's very different from other CI sites, which are basically just, you know, pinging in the background with JavaScript, or maybe using some kind of eventing mechanism to get the status back. So now it finished. Yeah, basically just took about a minute to upload. And if we go back to systemcrafters.cc, we should be able to see that the pages are now updated. Yep, the heading is the right size. If we inspect the element, we should be able to see that that got updated. So it basically shows you that it's instant. Whenever you get the page published, it goes live instantly. So this is H1 now. These are H2 based on the color of them. And if we go to the videos page, then we should be able to see that the Craft Your System with Geeks link does actually, oh sorry, the Introduction to Geeks link does work now because it points to the introduction path on that. So that's great. That was a pretty fast way to update that site. You know, didn't really have to do much work. Let's see. What else did I want to work on? So there's another thing that is really important to me for sharing my dot files with people, which is the ability to link to different sections of the file. So if I were to go to github.com/davidwheel/dotfiles, then you'll see, oh God, all right, let's not look at a white page right now. Let's go into a Qt browser instead. So if I were to look at this page, let's go to my Emacs config here. So if I go to Emacs config, if we go to any of these headings, you should be able to put your mouse over it and then see this little icon, which maybe you can't see on the stream, but it's basically a link. So if you click that, it actually creates a link to that specific heading in the document so that you can pass that to someone. I use this all the time for sharing things about my configuration with other people, to basically give them a link into the document to point them to a part of a configuration. I don't have that functionality in my personal config site. So if you go back to config.davidwheel.com, to the Emacs thing, the Emacs section, if I go to package management, that same section, when I hover over this, nothing happens. I can't copy a link to it, etc. So I'm gonna have to implement that behavior myself. We might try to do a little bit of that right now to see how it goes, but I don't know how much more time I want to spend on it. So let's see it. All right, so what I'm gonna do is go back over to publish.el, and we already have the header, or the heading. Where is it? Site heading, is that what it was? No, heading. There it is, HTML headline function. So what we, hi Kateru, or Kateru, I don't know how you pronounce your name. What we want to do here is change any heading that's written out to actually have a link to itself, basically. So inside the heading, it needs to be a link. let me think about this for a second. So can you put an href or an a tag inside of a heading? I guess we can find out really quickly. So let me just put something here. So I'm gonna put a ID equals, come on. Actually, if I do that, it's right, okay. You're not too late, we're still hacking on things. All right, so ID equals some heading. We're gonna fix this in a minute, but for now we're just gonna say some heading here. And why is it not colorizing correctly up until this point? I think that got deleted. Yeah, Lispy does some funky things sometimes. You have to kind of get it to play nice. So I have to hit Control Q backspace, I think. No. Maybe I would put an A around the heading, but I'm gonna try this first. Okay, great, that worked. Try it in DevTools first. Yeah, you're probably right, Tomas. Let me just go into Firefox. Oh, did I kill that Firefox already? Great. Okay, let's load up Firefox. And then go back to, let's say, config.davidwill.com. I love seeing Jack Dorsey's face every time I open up a tab. I'm being totally sarcastic. So let's see. So we're gonna go to this one here. I'm gonna use inspect element, and I believe I should just be able to go right in here and just edit this. So let's see, /a ID equals test, and then put it right here, /a. All right. I don't know if it worked, but let's see here. System settings, is it right there? Oh, okay. So yeah, that doesn't seem to work unless this is like escaping the input somehow. Do I need to add an element here? Let's see, create new node. Where's it gonna create it? Inside? Great, that's what I want. So a ID equals test. You don't let me update it? Come on, man. There we go, A. And maybe I have to actually do this too. So I need to add an attribute. Attributes, add attribute. This is kind of lame, but it'll work. Okay, now that's fine. Now I'm gonna change the content of this block, if it lets me. Maybe if I use right click. Oh, edit as HTML. Can I do that somewhere? Oh, thank you so much. That's great. System settings. Let's do some live hacking of Firefox here. All right, so I'm going to delete this element, delete this node. All right, so that now has an anchor inside of it, but it doesn't seem to be working as an anchor. So maybe I do need to wrap it. So if I were to create a new node, does that actually put it? Yeah, it puts it inside of the pre. I don't want that. Okay, so I guess that proves that you do need to have an A outside. Tomas says you can check how GitHub implemented it. That's also a good point. Let's go check out dot files. It will take me to my site. Okay. Probably it is that the A needs to be on the outside. Let's see. Let's inspect this element. I'm sorry for the blinding white color right now. All right, so H2. Open, please. Okay, so the A is inside. Minimal distractions class anchor. Okay, so it puts the A next to that, which is interesting. I wonder what the CSS selector they've got on that is to be able to have the hover on this work. Maybe it's the hover on the H2. Okay, so let's do that then. I think that's sufficient. So we'll put the text next to a hidden A. And how does the icon show up? What is this element? Octagon link. Okay, so it's like something inside the A. Interesting. All right. Cool. That's sufficient. All right, so I think then AID equals user content keyboard focused. Cool. All right. You need an href in the A. Do I need an href in the A though? Okay, so I need to have the actual anchor there. Okay. Well, that's if you want to click it, I think. So in this case, I need to click that, but I'm not getting to that point yet. I'm actually creating an anchor link to make it so that whenever you navigate to the page, it will go down to that element. href equals a hash also could work, I think. All right, so let's then go and change this. So what I'll do is not close out the H at that point. I'm going to close out the A here. And then the S is the content, I believe. So I'm going to put that right there. And then I'm going to close the A. And then I'll say href equals hash just to see what happens. So that should fix it up. The problem with putting the anchor around the heading is when you jump to it, it will be off screen. That's why I put it in front of the heading tag. That's interesting. Let's see. Let's then try to rebuild this and see what it does. Okay, so now I'm going to go look at the local version of... Oh, actually, did I... Okay, that's going to work for System Crafters. So let's go localhost 8080. All right, so now let's look at one of these elements, inspect element. And inside of the H2, I'll see there's AID some heading, href. Okay, so if I were to go up here, this is probably not going to work very well, but some heading. Okay, so it did work. It went down to this first heading that had that tag. So in theory, for if we were generating the anchor name for each of these correctly, then we should be able to jump to each of these basically using these anchor links. Any comments on that so far? Let's see. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here is basically find a way to generate that heading. To generate the anchor link based on the name of the heading. So we need to be able to jump down to that section of the file. So what I'm going to do is steal some code because we're in free software land here. I'm going to steal some code from Alpha Papa, who wrote the org make toc. I don't want to use Firefox for this. Let's go here. Org make toc package, and this is excuse me. This is a package I've been using up until now for generating a table of contents that can be displayed on GitHub to navigate to the various headings inside of my my dot file. So let's say, for instance, if I go to my dot files repo here and I go to the emacs.org page, you can see that there's a table of contents here. And if I go to one of these and click on it, it will actually jump down to the right heading. The reason why this works is because Alpha Papa has done the hard work of writing a function that translates the name of a heading to the expected string that GitHub would use for making the anchor link in their own representation of the page. So basically what we have to do is just rip off this piece of a function here to do that. Let's see, is it GitHub? Let's see, link GitHub. Let's just type GitHub. I know it's named something in here with GitHub in it. Link entry GitHub, that was the one. Link entry GitHub. Okay, so he's got this function here that basically takes the title, let's see, org heading components title. He's getting like the fourth element. Probably could use a plist get for that. And then taking the title string and then basically doing a few different things to it. So I think what we do is just take this and basically take this process and then use it. We won't use the same thing as he did. He's basically using a threading macro, it seems, if you know anything about threading macros. I think this is coming from the dash library, dash.el. I don't use that. I guess I could, but I don't really feel like pulling in another dependency right now. So we're gonna do our own thing. So we're gonna write defun dw make heading anchor name. And then we'll pass in the... It's interesting he doesn't pass in anything here. It must have context that it's using. All right, so we'll just go with that for now. I'll paste this in as sort of a target. And then I'm going to make my own let here. And we're going to grab the title, same way that he did, which is using inth4. We're getting the fourth element from org heading components. And then once we have that, we should be able to do some manipulation on it. So we'll just basically do the the multiple steps here. So I think that's good. Let's go inside of this, press enter. Then hi neurotransmission, nice to see you here. So I'm gonna use downcase first on title, fine. So now we're gonna have to wrap this, and we're gonna wrap it with replace regex in string. We're gonna replace spaces with hyphens, and then we're gonna move this here. So basically what we're doing is we're inverting the whole process he used because he's using a threading macro to accomplish the work that he's doing here. So we're gonna basically just reverse the whole order of things. And now we're gonna do replace regex in string. And let me just copy this regular expression because I don't really feel like typing the whole thing out. So we'll go do this, paste it in, and then I'm gonna move this parentheses to the end of the line. And then I'm also going to drop this down. Uh-oh, that's a nice thing with Lispy. Sometimes it likes to do that to you. Then let me format this really quickly. Okay, that seems to be fine. All right, so that should actually do the translation that we're looking for. And I can evaluate this. Well, I guess I don't need it here. Because I don't want to pull in the dash package, Osloy. I mean, I could do that, but I don't have to do that. Obviously, I can just do this. So it's easier for right now. I don't have to pull in a new package just to do it. So let's see. Here, what I'm going to do is go into the org HTML headline function and do anchor name, and then call the same function, dw make anchor heading name. I think that's right. Yeah, make heading anchor name. Apparently, I'm dyslexic today, so. Make heading anchor name. There's probably a way that I can transpose those two words. Don't judge me. Heading anchor name. Okay, so that in theory should give us the anchor name. And then here we can insert that into this string by using %s. And then we're gonna put it right after the attributes because we have the %d, %s that are the first two parameters. And then we have this %s, which is our string for anchor name. And now we should be able to see if that runs. So let's run it again and see if we get any errors. Yeah, Matthew, I'm also surprised that it doesn't have one built in. Okay, so before first headline at position 1, some error got written out, but it's not actually telling me. So, I don't think this is gonna work. Let's see if debug init works. No, okay, so I'm not getting a stack trace, which is interesting. So something I'm doing here is wrong. I think probably what the deal is I need to use the same type of functions that are being used here. So let me use this instead. I'm going to use this org element property title from headline instead of the function that he used. Let's paste that there, get rid of this piece. And then I'm going to put headline here as a parameter. And then when I call the function, I'm going to pass in the headline. And now let's run that again and see what it does. Okay, so at least we get something a little bit more. Wow. Wrong type char or string p. So maybe org export data. That's interesting. So I have to do that, call the org export data to get that. Oh, you know what I should just do? I'm just gonna pass in text here. So why even bother getting it? I already have it. So we can just take that out, indent that back, and then I'll make this headline text, let's say. Oh, and I think I used title here, which was the problem. Oh no, that's fine, headline text. Now let's see if that works. If it doesn't work, I'll start commenting out some things. Invalid function, replace regex in string. I might have done something wrong. Oh, that's right, okay, so I got an extra paren here. That's fixed. AJ says, your keyboard never makes any noise as you're coding. That's because I'm using a laptop keyboard right now. All right, so let's check the site in Firefox to see if it has what we expect it to have. I'm going to reload this page and check one of the headings. So let's inspect this element. And H2. And now it says video series. Awesome. So that actually did seem to work there. Let's see what else we have. Maybe on around the web, did it do that one correctly. I'm really curious to see a nested headline. Okay, around the web is working. Let's try this. I'll scroll up. I'll type in around-the-web, and it jumps down there, which is great. Let's also see about live streams. So let me try live streams. Live-streams, and then it goes directly to Element. So that's good. That seems pretty good for what we're looking for. I'm going to go to, why did it load the page like that? That was strange. It's flashing kind of strangely. All right, I'm going to go into this document, and I'm going to look at, let's say this one. This one has quotation marks. Let's see what it does with that. Okay, that's not too bad. A virtual environment tool for software development. I should just copy that string, I know. Virtual environment tool for software development. Boom. Okay, that works great. So apparently, that's all we needed to do was just set up that heading correctly and then use that nice little function that Adam wrote, Alpha Papa wrote, and put it right there on the anchor. Brendan says Emacs has the thread first function, which is similar to the macro and dash. Yeah, actually, I forgot about that. That's a good point. So there's a thread first. Is that? Yeah, it's not loaded by default. I think that it is in. Is it in CL utils? Which package is that in? I think require this. Will it actually show me CL dash? No. Yeah, I don't remember. Babu asks, did you consider doing it TDD or cumbersome in Emacs Lisp? Well, I didn't really consider writing tests for a website publishing code. Oh, subr_x, that's it, thank you. So require subr_x, and then we can do the thread first macro. Oh, it's not even here. Oh, you know what? I bet money that I need to look up the symbol instead because it's a macro. So I need to do Control-H-O, thread first. There it is. So thread first forms, and then basically it will pass in as the first parameter. In our case, actually, we would need thread last, I think, because we're going to pass it in as the last parameter. So just for fun, let's actually try that really quickly. So I think thread last is here. So Control-H-O, thread last. Yeah, all right. So we're going to use thread last. I'll copy this code just in case I totally screw it up. So thread last, and we're going to pass in first thing the headline text, and then we're going to call downcase, and I think what we'll do is call it with parentheses so that the macro will insert the last parameter. Interesting that it's not indenting that all the way. Maybe it's because it's a macro. I'll just do this. Oh, come on. All right, so the indentation rules here are a little bit funky, so let's just do it this way. All right, downcase. And then we're going to copy, replace regex bin string. How much time do we have left here? Not much. All right, so we got that. And then now we're going to copy this as well. And I'm going to go inside this and paste it inside and then delete that. And then now we should be able to, well, now we got to wrap everything. So Control-Q, paren, and then close. Come on, man. Control-Q. All right. So I think we're good on balancing now. Let me delete that. Okay. So now I'm going to run this again and see what it does. Doesn't seem to be crashing and burning yet. Great. Okay. So that's great. If we have thread last built in, then we don't need to worry about having dash.el to do the threading for us. We can have a nice looking function like this. So thank you, Brendan, for the suggestion. That's great. And just to make sure, I'm going to go and require subr_x, or actually I could just do it above that function to make sure that it's available. Require subr_x, because that's something it's included with Emacs, but I don't think it's loaded by default. I've had to add it to my own configuration. Let's see. Make sure we have thread last. Cool. So what I'm going to do now then is just commit this change because it works. Might as well just commit it. All right, we have that. We have that. I'm going to commit this, and then the commit will be add anchors to site headings or page headings. Let's say page headings. Commit it, push it, and now once I get pushed, the build should be kicked off, And we could check that on Sourcehut. I'll go back to the main builds page. And then we can see we have a new build. And then we can wait for that to finish. So the only other thing at this point then would be when you hover over the heading, it would be cool if you could see the anchor link that you could click on that would actually update that link in your browser. So what I would do for that, let's see, try to find my place where I was. What was it? HTML heading? There we go, headline. Okay. That's not finished yet. So what we're going to do is this AID, we can actually set a class on it. And in fact, I might want to move that to be, well, yeah, I don't want it to disrupt the page. I mean, there's probably some CSS tricks I could do to shift things over left a little bit if I wanted to have the link to the left, but maybe I don't care about that. Maybe I would rather have it at the right side. Who knows? Let's see, we finished here? Okay, we just finished generating. So I'm gonna go back to Firefox and then I'm gonna reload this page and just make sure that everything still has the expected tag. Oh no, sorry, that's localhost. Let's go to systemcrafters.cc. Probably I checked the wrong page before when we were looking at that, so nobody caught me. All right, so I'm gonna go to this page and then here, and then I'm gonna look at this one again. Let's check the element and see that we have the right heading anchor inserted. And it's still there. Great. So our change to do the threading did not break anything, which is great. All right, so back to the point of Tomas says, it's crazy that it downloads hundreds of megabytes to generate a site which has a few kilobytes only. I mean, yeah, you could look at it that way. It's kind of a lot of overhead, both in computing power and energy and bandwidth just to generate, you know, maybe a few hundred kilobytes of website or whatever and upload it. I mean, if you think of it that way, then maybe it's better to push it from your local machine, but it's really up to you, I guess, on how you want to do things. For me, I like the CI setup. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'll set up a new style. I actually stole some stuff from myself. Oh, and I would have to update this elsewhere, which I really don't want to do right now. Maybe it's not worth it, actually, to try to do that. I mean, we don't have much time left, so maybe I'll stop there. And I'll probably do this off stream because I really want to get that feature implemented. But I think it just shows that you can do some hacking on your site pretty easily using this approach to building a site with Emacs and org mode. And get results pretty fast. I mean, like, we're here making improvements to the site. We can see it live in a matter of about a minute. So I think it's pretty awesome. I'm really happy with this setup. And I'm also really happy with what I can do writing a site using Emacs. And if anybody else has any experiences with doing this and any cool tips to share, definitely leave them in the comments after the stream is over so that other people can see them. And also definitely come into the System Crafters Discord if you check the link in the description below and let us know there too, because I would love to know any other cool things that can be done with it. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today, just briefly, is the plan for the next episode of the Learning Emacs Lisp series. So that's what I'm planning to do for Monday, or next week's video will be the next entry in Learning Emacs Lisp. So we're going to continue on with the dotcrafter project that we started. And what I want to do is show some of the file and directory manipulation functions in Emacs and give some context with that by doing some things in the dotcrafter project, basically this .files management project. So I'm trying to think about what types of functionality I want to add to that package that would use the file and directory management functions so that we can explain them and then show how they would be used in practice. So what we did last time was figured out how to find all the files that are being generated from your org files that have all your configurations in them, and then add all those files to your git-ignore file buffer. That basically allows you to generate all of your config files into your .files repo, but then not check them in to source control because you're generating them anyway. There's no reason to have that duplicated information in your repository. Now, as other people have mentioned to me, Benoit being one of the people who said this, it's not necessary to do this. You could definitely just generate those files out to the real location in the home directory, which is entirely true. However, I'm trying to, at least for the purpose of this series, come up with interesting aspects to Emacs Lisp to use to show off the different areas of functionality. So I'm going to stick with that approach for now. And then later, after we've finished the series, I might go back and improve how the package works, because I do intend for people to use that package to manage their configurations. So for this video, what we would try to do is cover the other part of the configuration files that aren't actually managed in your org mode files. So for instance, for me, I have some files for my Qt browser configuration that aren't part of my org files. So if you go look at my desktop org file and go to the Qt browser section, let's see, where is that? Browsers? Yeah, there we go, browsers. No. Yeah, okay. We're in the Qt browser section here, and I have a block for the config.py file. That's basically all the configuration for that. I also have my quick marks listed here. But if you were to go to my .files folder into .config, and then in the Qt browser folder, there's a couple other files that are here. There's bookmarks. There's some Grease Monkey folder. Actually, that's probably not even needed. I could delete that if I wanted to. There's this autoconfig.yaml file that gets generated. And those are things that we would probably check into source control, but we wouldn't put into our org configuration file because there's really no reason to include those there. So we would just use the existing files that we have checked in. So inside the repo, we would leave those files to be checked in inside of your config folder, but then we have to basically merge those files with the generated files inside the target location in your home directory. So when we finally get around to making symbolic links from this .files/.config folder to the real home folder, we have to take both the generated files and the non-generated files and symbolically link them. There's a few other reasons that I want to do this individually by files and not just by folders, just based on my own experience doing this. So if it doesn't make sense, I'll explain that later. So basically, I was going to try to look more into the functions available for this in this stream, but I don't think I will because we've only got, about 8 minutes left. So I just want to sort of give you a heads up that this is sort of what we're going to go into on presumably Monday, so long as I prepare the content and get it recorded this weekend and then upload it by Monday. It may be Wednesday, depending on how things go. But yeah, I think that should be pretty fun. If you have any other ideas on that, definitely leave them in the comments and let me know. So Juan asks, why don't you tangle your org file to a .files folder and then create symlinks instead of directly tangle it to the real location? For the exact reason that I just mentioned, because you also have auxiliary files that you may have checked into your repo that you also need to symbolically link. You may not be generating all of your config files from org. Garjola asked the same question. Why is some of the files not in org babel blocks? Maybe you don't want to put them in there because they're not really interesting to see. I'll think through this a little bit more before I go through with making the episode, just to make sure that everybody sort of has, that it seems justified to do it, basically. Let's say that. Cateru asks, does Linux Geeks work on Raspberry Pi? I think people have tried it. I'm not exactly sure if it works on Raspberry Pi. I think that if you have a different distribution of Linux, like Debian or Ubuntu or something on the Pi, you might be able to install the Geeks package manager, but I don't know if Geeks itself will work directly. Somebody else might know the answer to that, though. Somebody else had mentioned Shepherd or Geeks at some point earlier. Let's see. I think someone asked, am I looking... A lot of funny comments here. So they were asking if I'm using Shepherd, which is basically the GNU service manager, sort of like systemd, but written in Scheme. If I'm using it on modern ThinkPads. Well, I'm using Geeks on modern ThinkPads, so that basically implies I'm using Shepherd. And the Geek series that we just started, whenever we finally get to the episode where we show how to install Geeks as your system distribution, I'm going to show you how to use the full Linux kernel to be able to install Geeks on a normal laptop that doesn't have like free hardware, etc. Oh, Avocadoros asked if I installed Shepherd on a new Lenovo. Yeah, I literally just bought a ThinkPad a couple weeks ago, and I Yeah, and I've installed Geeks there, and it works just fine. The only thing that doesn't work on the newest Lenovos is sound. Apparently, there is a new sound firmware called SOF bin or SOF firmware, Sound Open firmware, I think they call it. And that's not packaged for Geeks yet, but I'm actually working on that to get sound to work on my new Lenovo machine. But it works on everything else. Yes, I didn't have to change any hardware. This is a normal laptop. This is, you know, like a laptop that you're not supposed to change the hardware in. So yeah, I'm not changing any hardware. Kateru asks, is there any way to add function argument completion in TypeScript LSP mode? Yes, you need to use YA snippet, YA snippet. Let's see, YA snippet, Emacs. So LSP mode plus YA snippet gives you the ability to do completion for function arguments. Basically, it will like templatize the function that you've completed to give you all the parameters, basically. It can be pretty helpful. I haven't used it myself, but from what I understand, that's supposed to work if you use YA snippet. Sorry for blinding you there. Juan asks, could you share your CC Mixer playlist? I just love it. Yeah, I can definitely do that. I need to be updating the descriptions of the videos to include those songs. Technically speaking, I'm supposed to do that. So I'll try to add that to the description of this video and then all the other videos as well. Avocadoras asks, will you run a Guile scheme series in parallel to the Geek series? You need to learn Guile well to use Geek. Yeah, I probably won't do a Guile series in parallel because I've already got enough series going on at the same time. And I can only do one video per week aside from the stream at this moment. So I'm going to show enough of Guile scheme to be able to use Geeks effectively. But I definitely want to do a different series on Guile scheme at some point, or scheme in general even, because I think Guile is pretty useful for scripting on the GNU system, so it would be useful to know how to use that effectively. Oh, Jelly Leaked is here. I think Jelly is one of the contributors to Geeks. It says Geeks system works on RPI. Yeah, that's great. It works on Raspberry Pi. Let's see. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Jelly. I'm sorry. Let's see. Brendan K says, can Geeks use systemd, or does it only work with Shepherd? I don't think you can use systemd on Geeks because pretty much everything in Geeks and how it deploys a configuration is dependent on Shepherd. Kateru asked, did I try TreeSitter? I used to work with a guy who created TreeSitter. I haven't used it in Emacs, but I've used it in Atom. But yeah, no, I haven't used it in Emacs yet, but I imagine it would be pretty useful. Let's see. Osloy says, foo bar cursor in indentation, hit J in normal mode. Is that for joining the line? Let me see. Yeah, sometimes I don't get to see all the comments as they're going by. Hey, Jonathan, nice to see you, man. I'll plug Jonathan's channel in just a second. Let me just try this one thing real quick. So let me drop this down. And you said if I go to here and press J. Okay, yeah, it joins the line. So that's great. I don't know what I was doing that made you give me that comment, but that's helpful. Wow, you run Geek system containers on your Raspbian. That's pretty hardcore. Do you use like another system to do your builds for all your packages if anything has to be built? Because I think building on a Raspberry Pi would probably be really annoying. All right, I'm gonna do this in Q browser instead. Okay, so I'm gonna look up Jonathan Turner's channel here. Systems with JT. Just so you people know, Jonathan Turner, who just showed up in the chat, oh geez, as a coworker of mine, or I guess you could say former coworker of mine, who's also very well known in the Rust community. He has also a YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning Rust, or you're interested in like niche operating systems, you should go check out his channel because he does videos on both of those things. If this thing will finally let me type, I'll just put it in systems with JT. Yeah, whenever I have the stream running, this computer just dies. Okay, there's his channel. So yeah, I'll throw this in the chat. But if you're interested in Rust and whatnot, definitely give a look to his channel. Let's see, what else we got here? Oh, cursor can be anywhere on the line. That's useful. Yeah, it takes forever to build that. I imagine that's way too long. I would definitely have another server to do the build for that. But I've never set that up before, so I don't really know like how you configure a separate server for doing builds. But I know it's in the documentation. All right, I think we hit the 2-hour mark here. I can take a couple more questions if anybody has any, but we're going to start winding the stream down here in a second. But that was pretty fun today, though. I mean, it was cool to be able to make some changes to the website real time and sort of show how this works. I like this setup a lot. I think it's very simple. Another thing that I wanted to try to do today, if I had time, which we didn't obviously do, is to try to reduce duplication between the code of all three of these sites, because I literally had the same Emacs Lisp file copied in all those repos. I need to start factoring out some of this code into like a shared library so I could pull that in instead. I'll do that soon. I don't want to publish it to Melpa. I'm debating on whether I want to actually pull straight.el into this script, because it's going to add a whole lot of bootstrapping that I don't really want. So I'm trying to avoid the whole problem of using a different package manager. Matthew asked, what's the complete stack I use for static website? I'm using org publish. I'm using OX Slim HTML for the base of the HTML export backend, and I'm using ESXML for doing the templating of the HTML bits. So you can see here I've got eLisp expressions for templating the HTML, and then I'm using HTMLize for generating the syntax highlighted code blocks. Kateru asks, is there any way to add color to Dired? Well, I don't know what happened with your last update, but I definitely have colors in mind, so it must be some bug. You might want to check your messages buffer to see if there's any problems there. Yeah, like Tomas says, you maybe need to go look at the DiredX package and see if it's being loaded correctly. Somebody else asked a question. Yes, and Avocadoras asked about Haunt again. Haunt is a Guile scheme-based static site generator, and I had not used it before, but the guy who wrote it, Dave Thompson, is a pretty smart guy, and he writes a lot of cool stuff, so I imagine it's pretty cool. But for me, I spend a lot of my time in Emacs, so it makes sense to me to use Emacs to do this, since it can do it, obviously. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I've used ClojureScript to generate sites before, and that was pretty fun, but I kind of like the fact that I can just use Emacs and spend more time just writing Emacs Lisp for this. All right, folks. Well, I think that's it for today. Before I head out, I just want to say thank you. Oh, one thing I do want to say, like the stream. I mean, I meant to say that at the beginning, but I always forget because I just jump right into it. But if you give a like to the stream, it helps other people find it while we're streaming, but it will also help people find it after the fact. So if you have a moment, just give a like to the stream if you enjoyed what you saw today. So I want to say a big thank you to my sponsors. Some of them are actually here today in the chat. These people have decided to sponsor the work that I'm doing, making these videos about GNU Emacs, GNU Geeks, etc. And they're sort of a big part of why I continue forward making these videos, because it feels really good to know that people care enough about what I'm doing that they are willing to sponsor my work. So if you're interested in also becoming a sponsor of the channel, definitely take a look at the links that I have in the description. I think I haven't changed it to the new link on the System Crafter site yet, but I actually do have a new link there that gives more information. But the links are in the description for that, so check it out. I'm on both GitHub sponsors and Patreon. I also have a link to PayPal for one-time tips, basically. Garjola says again, it's a shame that Biden changed the time without telling you. Well, I mean, the stream came 1 hour earlier for you, so maybe it's a better thing. I don't know. If it's not good, then I guess you'll have to take it up with Biden in that case. But anyway, so the next thing that we're going to do next week is the next Learning Emacs Lisp video, and then we'll have another live stream again on Friday. I think on Friday we might talk about the new sort of Gemini protocol that's sort of like an alternative to HTTP for having, like, it's not really websites necessarily, but it's sites of a certain type. So I'm planning to experiment with that a little bit, and we might talk about it on the stream next Friday. So that should be pretty cool. So anyway, thanks a lot again for everyone being here today. You're awesome. I really appreciate all the interaction, all the suggestions, and for helping me out with my terrible coding skills. And yeah, until next time, thanks a lot. Happy hacking. See ya.